So now you're more known as an options trader. I think that's how a lot of people know what you do now. When did you first start trading options, and what was that process like? How'd you learn to trade options? Did you have
Yeah.
immediate success?
It
And
was tough, man. It was tough. There was a story. There was one kid at the office that I was at. We called him the flux capacitor, man. So shout out to anybody who's watched Back to the Future. We call him the flux capacitor. The kid knew everything, right? I mean, we would be like, "Yo, Flux, give me the earnings on X, Y, and Z," and he'd have it for you. You know what I mean? So we would always shoot stuff over to this kid, and he would always kind of send me ideas of other things. I'd never really pay attention. You know what I mean? He was one of those kids that knew all this stuff, but he couldn't execute. He couldn't actually trade, but he was just a great research guy, you know. And we know plenty of these people, right? And it doesn't make them bad or better people at all. It just makes them good at whatever the hell there is that they're good at. You know, some traders are specifically traders because they can execute. They can execute under fear. They can execute under a lot of other circumstances that other people can't. They can't research at all. They don't give a shit about research. You know what I mean? So everybody has their part to play. So he would always send me like options ideas. So whatever, I figured, screw it, I'll take a flyer on Cheesecake Factory earnings or something like that. I bought a 10 lot or 20 lot or something like that. And then overnight, like I doubled because the stock moved in my favor. I think I doubled or tripled on it. And I was like, whoa, how do I do this with 250 grand, man? You know what I mean? So again, like I was young at that time, I wanted these sort of big gains. So the potential for big gains kind of brought me to the options world. However, the process of understanding options is way more complicated. I mean, I don't want to say too complicated that you can't figure it out. It's a learning curve that you're not prepared for, especially if you're going into it thinking you're going to make all this money, So the learning curve for options is very peculiar because you could be great at trading stock and you could be great on picking direction and you could be great on all that kind of stuff. That doesn't mean you're going to translate to dollars when you trade the options. A lot of guys are great at picking direction and all that kind of stuff, but they can't make a dime in options because the timing, you got to deal with timing, you got to deal with implied volatility, you got to understand why an option is priced the way it is. Most people have no clue. They just look at something and say, okay, this Tesla put is trading $3, but they have no idea why. And they have no idea what are the influences here. You know what I mean? What's going to make them pay? What's going to make people pay double for it? What's going to make people pay less than half for it? You know what I mean? So when people have an idea, it's easier to execute in stock because you got more kind of cushion. You got more you can kind of feel around a stock way better than you can an option. You try to feel around in an option, you'd be down 50% or 40%, but that's normal. You know what I mean? That's completely normal. Depends on your expiration. You got to deal with all this kind of other stuff. And it took me a while to figure all that stuff out. It took me a while. It took me a lot of losses to figure that out. So I would be trading SPY with like considerable amounts of money. And I was just back and forth, up and down, like 30 grand, 50 grand every single day. I was like, what is going on here? Then you start to learn how to cut down on trades. You start to learn how to single out things. You start to learn, like, okay, why, you want to come in when nobody wants the option, theoretically. And you want to come in when and again, behavior and psychology play a huge role in why an option is priced the way it is. People don't look at it that way, but you got to look at it as everybody who is trading that option, including the market maker, is constantly deciding where it should be priced. So if you're good at reading tape, and this is how I started to become just a monster in tape, if you're good at reading tape, I can tell immediately if I can get that option for cheaper or I need to get in now because this thing's about to run away. You know what I mean? I can tell these things being a good tape reader. And again, that's how I started the game. So then I realized the connection of the two could yield some really explosive gains. So that's how I started. It probably took me close to a year, man, to just figure it out.
wow, yeah.
Yeah.
And what would you say is a way that people can maybe expedite the learning curve of options, if there's even a way to do it?
I would take my master course. I really would. It's a shameless plug, really, but I put it together for a reason. So I'll teach you tape. I'll teach you like the human element of options. Forget Black Scholes, forget all this mathematical jargon, forget all that stuff. Just look at it from a behavioral perspective and an emotional perspective, and learn to ask yourself the right questions. So these are the things that I'll teach my guys. So once they're done with the course, they'll easily be able to look at a name, look at an option chain, and be like, all right, I'm going for this expiration, I'm going for this, and this. But if my tape doesn't show me X, Y, and Z, I know I'm going to get this thing for cheaper anyway. So I'm going to wait for a 50% discount, and then I'll get in. So they'll be able to do things like that. So that's what I would say is
Great. And can you talk a bit about the importance of reading tape and even order flow in your strategy?
yeah, it's everything. To me, it's everything. And you take it back to tickets, man. You take it back to tickets. You take it back to every secondary market. What do you have to do before engaging into a secondary market, right? And we look at the biggest secondary market right now, which is Amazon, right? So Amazon for a reselling game, I mean, shit, here in Puerto Rico alone, some of the top 50 Amazon sellers are here on the island simply because you can benefit off the taxes. So of course, they're coming here. And if you talk to any of these guys, there's a significant amount of research and there's a significant amount of input they need to figure out before they get into a particular market. Let's say one is, selling vending machines or treadmills or whatever the hell it is. These guys are constantly looking at the metrics that Amazon will put out, or they'll create their own databases for this stuff to figure out where the sales are going on these particular products, how can they get them for cheaper, and all that kind of stuff. So the same thing in tickets. All I'm looking at is demand. How do I find the demand? Look at the history of some past concerts. Look at the record sales numbers of a particular artist. Look at sporting events. If some tennis player is going crazy, or some basketball team is winning everything, or something like that, something that spurs demand. So, and then you convert it to the equity markets. You might see a piece of news here and there, but then the most important thing is to look at the reaction, to look at the tape, look at the transactions. If I can feel the whole world buying freaking Peloton because I don't know, maybe there's some buyout hopeful, down the road, but I can see hundreds of thousands of orders coming in and people not even caring about price. And then when you're talking about flow here as well, like people putting, millions of dollars to work on a bet, you know what I mean? That may or may not happen, but they're putting significant amount of capital to work. I can't just not look at that. We can't just not look at that. All of that is demand. All of that is supply. All of that is something that's going to affect price that I might be able to make some money off of. So it's everything. Without tape, I got nothing.